IT Talent College presents Hans de Zwart, Director of Bits of Freedom on Privacy.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. So I have three questions here for you. And I want to start with the first question, and that is there another way of looking at technology? And I'll try and explain a bit with that what I mean. And for that, I have to go to my favorite book in the world by my favorite author, Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan. The book is now more than 50 years old. He wrote it in 1964. And he was quite clairvoyant. If you read it now, you think still that you're reading a book that was written about the future or for the future in a sense. And in it, he describes how you can look at technology in a very particular way. He was a literature professor, by the way. And his favorite metaphor was this one. It was called Into the Maelstrom. It's based on a story about three brothers who go fishing every year by a boat, and they get caught in a maelstrom. And one of the brothers gets so upset so quickly that he instantly jumps overboard and gets sucked down. Another brother is so scared that the only thing that he can do is hold on to the ship, and he goes down with the ship. And there's one brother who decides to sort of take a meta position, I guess you could say, by looking at what is happening and trying to discern the patterns in the situation. And what he saw was that certain objects kept popping back up. So he decides to hold on to one of those objects, and he survives, and he tells the story in this story. And the lesson for McLuhan by that is that you should always look at the patterns. You should always try and see what is going on rather than sort of jumping headfirst into things or being very conservative and never doing anything. Another metaphor that he used a lot was the Figureground metaphor. This is a famous picture. Depending on your perspective, you can see somebody playing a saxophone or you can see a woman's face. But what he said is that in our way of looking at technology, what we do is we always focus on the figure, on the things that are on the foreground, the things that are easy to see. Whereas he says the way that the world works is as much shaped by the ground, by the things in the background. And so what he says is that technology is an extension of man. Later on, we'll talk about the Apple FBI case, where, in a sense, one of the problems is that your phone is a literal extension of you. So when the police wants to get into it, they basically want to get into you. And so in this book, he writes about how the car is an extension of the foot, or your clothes are an extension of the skin. And let's focus on cars for a minute. So the figure of a car, or the foreground, the things that are very obvious about cars and in the way that they bring technology, is that they enable personal transportation, freedom to go where you want, sort of the ultimate dream of being on the road and traveling wherever you want to go. But at the same time, the ground of cars and the things that cars also necessarily bring are obviously, in the current state of the world, massive pollution, climate change, etc. But also things like suburbs. Suburbs are a consequence of the car being invented and being part of our world. Or traffic jams. The fact that we're in a traffic jam for most of us, or many of us, I should say, for 2 hours a day, has to do with cars. Similarly with television. McLuhan, of course, in the 60s writes a lot about television. The internet wasn't there yet. And the figure of television is that it brings the world into your living room, in a sense. You're connected with what is happening outside of your living room. But the sort of the ground of television is that it turns people into completely passive couch potatoes. This is sort of the natural thing that will happen when you put television into somebody's house. So what I then like to think about is, so looking at something like social networking, the figure of social networking is, of course, connecting with people, making instant groups, being able to make your world smaller, stay in touch, all these things. And these are the things that sort of most mainstream media will write about, yes? Last week we had the news of Facebook increasing the number of like buttons with 6-fold, yes? You now can also press wow, I guess, or sad, or whatever it is. But if you look at the ground, what does it mean that we have social networking in our world? So one thing that I think comes with it is the fact that you're being surveilled, and that you give away control of your life, and you give away freedom in a sense. So why I'm saying this is that most of you will be IT students, is that we should never believe anybody that tells you that technology is a neutral tool, and that it depends on how it's used, what the effects will be. Technology comes with certain biases, and those biases will lead to certain results. And so it's always worthwhile to think, for every part of technology that's in your life, what does this technology make easier? What does it make harder? What will be the consequences? So I always say that technology is politics. Technology is about living a good life or not. It's about making choices that affect our social dynamics. And you have to realize that technology mediates most things nowadays. Between you and the other in any sort of interaction, nowadays sits a third party. And that comes with consequences. So whether it is Facebook for our sort of social connections, or LinkedIn for our professional connections, or Amazon for our books, or Spotify for our music, or YouTube or Netflix for our videos, we now have a third party that can see whatever you listen to, read, do, and can influence it and even censor that in a sense. So you need to realize that it has very serious consequences. My favorite thing is that to ask people is, how many of these services know when you are having sex, you think? Yeah? So I think, for example, Spotify can probably do a pretty decent estimate. Yeah? And you have to realize that I think Google knows me much better than I do myself, or certain parts of it, yes? Because Google never forgets. Yeah, and I forget stuff all the time. So Google probably knows how much sleep I was getting 2 years ago exactly, and how my sleep pattern has changed, and when exactly I changed job, and where I was at one particular time. This exact moment, 1.5 years ago, where was I? Probably Google can tell me in the snap of a moment. And an exercise that I like doing with people is sort of close your eyes for a second. I won't ask you to do it now, but you can do it in your imagination. And think about, what are the things that you have typed into that Google search bar, assuming you use Google and have it switched to some other alternative. And imagine what you have typed there in the last 4 weeks or so, and what I could know about you if I would have that information. Yeah. So I probably so first of all, I know everything you didn't know. Yeah. So basically, everything you don't know yet, every word that you don't know how to spell, that's all the stuff I know as well. I probably know what diseases you have, or at least what symptoms you have, because you've typed that in. I know most of your intentions, where you're going to go on a holiday, where do you want to eat, where have you been, etc. I probably know your name, because if you're like me, you type it in quite often. So and you need to realize that your search patterns also come with sort of metadata of when you search and from where you search. So Google basically knows whether you're sleeping or not on the basis of when you're using their products or not. So Google knows way more than you think. Thank you.